I'm going to be drinking my coffee as we.
That is fine. I should have water. I should have water with me, but I don't. It's fine. Okay, hello everyone. I am super excited to introduce this guest speaker. This is Dr. Michelle May Curry, and I was trying to think of the best way to introduce her, but then I realized that she should just introduce herself. So I am going to let Dr. May Curry take it over from here.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Michelle May Curry. I am the project director of the Humanities for All initiative at the National Humanities Alliance, which is a national organization that advocates for humanities in higher ed, in community, and on the Hill. And I work on our initiative Humanities for All, which focuses on public humanities work happening in higher ed and in communities. But I also am a lecturer at Georgetown University currently, teaching in their new master's in engaged public humanities. And I'm teaching a class on humanities industries and helping master's students interested in public scholarship think about various career trajectories for humanities degree holders. So I'm a teacher on one hand and project director of Humanities for All on the other hand. And then I also do some public scholarship in the many hours that I have left over after doing all those things.
Yeah, and the 2 hours you have left over.
Yeah. So I work, I'm working on turning my research into various public facing things. I love the gallery space, exhibition spaces as a venue for that. And so I've been thinking about various ways that I can sort of flex my curatorial muscles as I transition into this next phase of my life, which is I just finished my PhD this summer.
Which we love to see it.
And so I just finished my PhD in American culture from the University of Michigan. And so I'm thinking about what it looks like to enter this new phase of not being a student anymore and thinking creatively about what that career path looks like.
I love that. I love that. See, this is why I wanted you to introduce yourself, because this is goals. I'm like, okay, manifesting this for the next 5-6 years. This is what we want. And so you mentioned that you got your PhD in American Studies, or was it American Culture? I want to make sure I'm saying
that. Yeah, University of Michigan, it's called American Culture, but it's essentially American Studies. At University of Michigan, they like to give it a little bit more of a cultural studies.
Okay, awesome. And what inspired you to study American culture?
So, and I can also just give sort of a background of why I wanted to go into a PhD in general. So in undergrad, I was an English and political science major, double major. And I was in my sophomore year. And all of my friends were applying to Mellon May's undergraduate program, which is just basically like a program for predominantly students of color or students from underrepresented backgrounds to explore research and trajectories into higher ed. So preparing students to think about being professors or doing research in a college space. So I did not get into that program, the Mellon May's program, but I still found ways of doing research at that level. And so I did a lot of like research assistantships with mentors in undergrad, and spent a summer researching women in jazz, to speak to some of your interests, women in jazz, and then got a really great fellowship the next summer off of that one summer of research assistantship. I got this great opportunity to go to the University of California, Berkeley for a summer and conduct my own research project, learn how to sort of start a project from like the beginning phases of like, I find this interesting, to like present at a conference, panel style. And so I started doing research on, I guess I should say what my research was on, which is that I started with a project on Bill de Blasio's racially mixed family. So Bill de Blasio he's currently the mayor of New York City.
Yeah, I live here. I know that.
Yeah. Mayor of New York City. And in 2013, 2014-ish, when I was doing this, initially starting to do this work, he was running for mayor of New York. And his campaign platform was about sort of showing the tale of two cities and of New York. So there was this like ultra rich white New York, and then a majority population of color that did not have access to the same New York. And at the center of his campaign was uplifting his mixed race family and his Black wife as emblems of this uniting of the tale of two cities. And I found that fascinating as a campaign platform. And I wanted to sort of dig into why that was so compelling to the New York City electorate, what was fruitful about that, and what was really sort of icky about that. And so I spent a summer thinking about that, and then like putting that instance in conversation with lots of different cultural texts. So I was the movie Belle came out around that same time, and so I got to flex a lot of muscles around like taking my English background, taking my poli-sci background, and thinking about like how culture and politics sort of interweave. And so when it came time to think about what I wanted to do post-grad, I still had a lot of burning questions with my research. I still had a lot of things that I wanted to pursue based on that summer of research that sort of took me down the grad school route. So I said I wasn't done here. I want to produce something. I want to like keep thinking about this. And so I applied to American Studies programs. I applied to Afghan Studies programs, English programs, really like across the board. And Michigan was the only school that I got into, but also happened to be the best school for me. And I can talk all about why that is, but I'll stop there. And that's why American Studies.
I love that. And I love that you were able to sort of take, I love the thing that you talked about taking an idea and taking something that was just of interest to you, and then developing that into something that was ready for a conference. And I think that that's so powerful, because I think that this is where it starts, you know, at least for me, it was like, I really resonate with that idea of, oh, there's something that I'm passionate about. There's something I'm interested in. And then realizing that there are avenues for you to be able to explore this, not just on a personal level, but on an academic level, you know, a collegiate level, and really be able to sort of like go from point A to point B and beyond. So I like that idea of starting with a question and then seeing how you can bring it to fruition, and then being able to go to school for that. So after you completed your master's, you started your doctoral program that took about 5 years or so, yeah?
Yeah, so the American Culture program sort of gives you a master's along the way. So okay. I was admitted into the American Studies PhD, and that took 6 years. And after year 2, they gave me a master's.
Okay, got it.
Like, great job, here's a master's.
Okay, same. That's how my program is. It's like you get an MPhil after you learn 2 languages and you're still here. Like you haven't left us. Here's a master's.
Here's a piece of paper. Yep.
Pretty much. Okay. So you did that. And then while you were in your doctoral program, and this is something that, again, for very selfish reasons, I was like, I gotta talk to you about this. So you're in this program, you're taking your compositional exams, you're studying, you're doing all this work. The core of your project is very public facing and looking at, I think, focusing on politics is about as public facing as it can get, looking at constituents, asking questions. How were you able to manage all of this while in a doctoral program?
So I'll say that the questions that I started with finishing undergrad and going into grad school, so that project on de Blasio really blossomed. It's that project turned into chapter 4 of my dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
So, for folks who are like sitting on their undergrad thesis, thinking that it'll never see the light of day, I was able to eventually publish that chapter
Okay.
in American Quarterly. So it had legs after college. But
Definitely
that,
taking that advice.
yeah, it took a lot of work, but we got it there. So that initial project really blossomed in grad school into a full dissertation project that focused on visual, mostly photographic representations of mixed race families in the 20th and 21st century, and looking at how those representations shifted and evolved in relationship to Black politics and culture. And I put a lot of emphasis on Black women curators, Black women and mothers who were sort of shaping the narratives of mixed race families throughout this century. So we often see a lot of white mother, Black father families, or white women talking about racial mixedness, and I wanted to emphasize Black women's perspectives and Black mothers' perspectives on that family dynamic. And so images turned into my dominant archive, my dominant primary source material for my dissertation. And so it naturally led to thinking about the different types of publics that might consume these images and the different types of publics that have access to the archival materials that I was looking at. And I got really sort of frustrated by the lack of access to some of the materials that I was working with. It just felt like such a shame that some of these materials were just like sitting in basements. And so I got into public facing work because, first of all, I found that I didn't really love teaching too much. Years 1 and 2, I was a TA, grad student instructor for a couple classes, and it just like wasn't really scratching the itch for me that I was hoping it was, and that I saw it scratching the itch for other people in my department. And so after year 2 or so, I started really actively seeking out opportunities to think about what a non-tenure track career could look like. And so I did this great program called Humanities Without Walls through University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. But that summer institute really introduced me to lots of different forms of humanities in the world, lots of different career trajectories. And it really empowered me to start to look for those opportunities and see them as like a viable pathway for me, that didn't feel like I was setting out on some like uncharted territory. There were people out there doing this work in ways that were exciting to me. And so this opportunity came across my inbox. I think the header of this email was like, work with Carrie Mae Weems on an exhibition. And for folks who don't know who Carrie Mae Weems is, she is one of the foremost photographers working right now. She's a Black woman photographer, and her work is just absolutely brilliant. She's
What is it? I'm definitely gonna have to write her name down.
Carrie Mae Weems.
Okay.
If you're familiar with like the MacArthur Genius Grants or Genius Awards, she has one of those.
Oh, wow. Okay.
She has this really brilliant series called the Kitchen Table series, which is pointed to a lot as like some of the most like defining work on Black womanhood and the domestic space, like the home space. And so this opportunity to work with Carrie Mae Weems came across my inbox. And what it ended up being was this year-long fellowship experience through an organization called the Carr Center in Detroit, which is a performing arts and mostly Black musical and performing arts organization, nonprofit. And it's a year-long opportunity to work with early career artists and scholars who were invested in Black culture or identified as Black or did Black studies. And so I applied to this and got in and spent the next year working with a group of artists and Carrie Mae Weems on a series of exhibitions. We put together an exhibition in Havana, Cuba, for their Havana Biennale, their arts biennial, and then put on another exhibition in Detroit in the Carr Center's new gallery space. And in that second gallery space, in that Detroit exhibition, I was able to turn one of my dissertation chapters into an installation in that space. And so how I was able to do public scholarship in grad school was that it was a one-to-one fit with my ongoing work for grad school. Like I turned the work that I was thinking about constantly into something that could be public facing and engaging. And so it didn't feel like I was stretching myself to the point where I was like apples and oranges in how I was using my time. It felt like I was naturally taking this work that I was invested in and bringing it into a different space.
I love that. I love it. I was writing down a few notes because I'm just like, okay, Carr Foundation. Actually check.
Yeah, you should
NYU
check out the
emails.
Carr Center. Yeah.
Carr Center with 2 R's, 1 R.
2 R's.
Okay, because I feel like I've heard of them before. That's why it sounds familiar.
Well, that's where Terry Lynn Carrington is. She has a fellowship, like a residency there.
Okay, maybe that's why I feel like because that's probably why I've heard of it. So Carr Center, and then what was the other one? Humanities. What is it? Without Walls.
Humanities Without Walls. Yeah. Okay. So that's in a workshop that's available to a consortium of institutions. I'm not sure if NYU is one of those institutions, but there's similar programs. Other people point to like Imagining America as a similar program. So it's like a career professionalization workshop.
I love that. And see, this is the sort of stuff that I love to hear about. So I guess this would be a good segue for, although I feel like you've already touched on it, but still, do you have any advice for undergraduate students and graduate students that are interested in perhaps non-quote unquote traditional trajectories, or, maybe they've decided that being a professor perhaps isn't for them, or they don't know what they want to do, but they, are inspired by this idea of pursuing, higher education because they have an idea, they have a passion for something, and they want to be able to research it, but they don't really know how to go about entering a doctoral program without assuming that you have to become a professor. So do you have any advice?
Yeah. I would say a couple things. One is for folks who are already in degree granting programs that are sort of
let me get my post-its out. Okay.
like if they're on the master's and PhD trajectory already. One of the more valuable things that really grew my ability to do publicly engaged work was having a support structure that was outside of academia. That I had mentors who were not professors, who were not sort of like steeped in higher ed value structures and reward structures, who had very different value structures and reward structures. Okay. So being mentored by an artist like Carrie Mae Weems, as opposed to being mentored by a faculty member, yielded very different results, not only for like my understanding of who my scholarship was for, but literally how I did my work. The methods that I used to do my work changed because I was doing it with such a different group of people. You know, artists have, a lot of artists, especially Black artists, could really care less about like the institution and how you make it legible to the institution. And so that felt really freeing to me, and really generative for me to have that space. And you can also get that from like volunteering, right? Like taking your interests that aren't necessarily aligned with academic structures and finding spaces where you can give some of your time. And that in and of itself builds relationships, right, that allow you to think about how you can get engaged in other ways. So like something I will say is, folks know when you're doing publicly engaged work, folks know when you're coming at it genuinely, and when you're coming at it just to like get the credential or get the engaged work in dip, right? So like building relationships and establishing like a mutually beneficial partnership is something that takes time and effort and knowledge of the groups and communities that you're moving through. So that year-long partnership with the Carr Center was, to me, that was a good start. It took us a long time to get to the point where we were able to put on exhibitions together, right? It took like many meetings for us to establish a rapport, but it took even longer for that Carr Center exhibition space to feel like a rooted space where Detroit, where people who are living in Detroit felt like they could come in and share that space. And so I wasn't able to be a part of that work because I moved on to Boston, but I know that there were folks who got to stay on and sort of be a part of establishing what that space looked like. So.
I love that. I love that. I wrote that down, mutually beneficial partnership. I feel like that's especially important in academic spaces, or just spaces where you either intentionally or unintentionally in a lot of ways sort of carry a lot of privilege. And I feel like that's an interesting concept, especially as a Black woman, you know, to think that I'm entering a space where I'm carrying a lot of privilege. But that's something that I'm learning, you know, the longer I, you know, spend, you know, attached to institutions. You really do have to be mindful about the way that you're navigating these spaces, because people can pick up very quickly whether or not you're authentically there to connect with the community, or it's like, let me take that selfie, hashtag NYU, hashtag like engaging with the community. And it's like, I definitely don't want to bring that energy to any space that I am having the privilege of interacting with. So I love that, mutually beneficial partnerships.
Yeah.
Love that. Okay, so you also kind of answered this question, but I guess I kind of want to like I really want to drive this point home, because I think this is really what the core of grad school is all about. It's how did you, no, wait, I can't even read my own writing. I'm so sorry. Okay, how did your grad work and any other life experiences, but I'm really focusing on the life experiences here, lead you to your current position? Like, do you think that aside from your work, you know, with the Carr Foundation and, you know, doing your work with, you know, looking at Bill de Blasio's campaign and looking at interracial families, why do you think that resonated so heavily with you? Like, why do you think you're doing the work that you're doing, and how did it lead you to your organization?
Yeah. So I'll tackle the sort of how I ended up in the position that I am now. And I'll say that the pandemic has a lot to do with like why I'm in the position that I am in now. Yeah, like I'm not gonna try to like, you know, tie a pretty bow over how I got to where I am now. Like we're all living in an alternative reality of what the past couple of years could have looked like, or could have been. And so when I was, so let's see, year 5, I moved to Boston on a fellowship with my dissertation chair. She offered me some funding to be at Harvard with her because she got one of those. She moved from University of Michigan to Harvard. She got a new position there, and she was lucky enough to bring a couple of her students along with her for a couple of years of funding. And so I was one of those students who got to travel with her for a year. And that year turned into 2 years because of COVID. And I know.
That's wild. COVID out here getting you an extra year at Harvard. Like what?
So I was in a position where year 5, I was at Harvard, thinking about next steps for my career, working on my advisor's book project as her research assistant. And she brought me on as a co-author of a visual essay in her book. So I got to sort of curate my own little mini exhibition within her book. The book is called All That She Carried by Taya Miles. It's on the short list for the National Book Award right now in nonfiction. So
okay.
It's really cool. It's really an amazing book.
Extra year at Harvard, shortlisted for a national award, All That She Carries. Can you send your autograph virtually? Just proof that I got to speak with you.
It's really, I feel like my mentorship experience in grad school has been overwhelmingly positive. I've just been given these opportunities by really generous faculty time and time again. And this is another instance of that. So I was at Harvard, just doing this really amazing work, well-funded, doing my dissertation work. I was applying to summer internships for that summer in between my 5th and 6th year. And I was in the final stages of an internship interview phase for the Obama Museum in Chicago. They were looking for interns in their curatorial department, and they're breaking ground on that project now, and they were sort of building that project up at the time. And then the pandemic hit, and that internship no longer existed.
Oh, wow.
And then the job market no longer existed.
Yeah, we can just skip over that. We ain't gotta talk about that. That's
and so I was staring at my 6th year, my final year, my job market year, and thinking, I'm screwed. I'm screwed. Even the best candidates, there's nothing for them right now. And so I started looking across the different job boards and doing a lot of informational interviews and thinking about okay, I'm interested in the museum world, but I'm also interested in sort of the foundation world and grant making and advocacy work. And I have this public humanities background and what organizations exist out there that are invested in that. And the National Humanities Alliance job popped up right around the time that I had just had a really excellent informational interview with someone at the National Endowment for the Humanities, who had given me the lay of the land of what the humanities advocacy world and grant making world looked like. So she was there's the American Council for Learned Societies, there's the National Endowment for the Humanities, there's Mellon, there's the Whiting Foundation. And she sort of gave me that bird's eye view. And so the job that I'm currently in now popped up, and I immediately applied because it felt like I was a shoo-in, and it felt that way. I felt really prepared, and it really aligned with the skills that I had built and sort of the communities that I wanted to be a part of. And so timing wise, it was great. And it was remote work. So fully remote. They were flexible in terms of letting me finish my PhD and work full time. So when I took on this job, I was still in my 6th year of my PhD and working a 9 to 5. And
what? Like, oh my God.
And doing like public scholarship where it was just a little bananas. I'm not gonna lie. But that was sort of like how I landed where I am now. I feel like I missed a bit of your question though. Of like the life, like how did I get here?
The life experiences. I mean, we can touch on that in a second, but honestly, it just, wow, I'm again, I keep using this word, but I'm manifesting this energy, flexible work hours, finishing PhD, but I can't imagine doing the 9 to 5 while also finishing your dissertation. Like, that is, my hat is off to you. Because I mean, the pandemic is difficult enough, but adjusting to, a new work environment, looking for jobs, trying to figure all that out while finishing your dissertation. That is some Black girl magic right there. That is incredible.
I'm not gonna sit here and act like it was an easy year. It was very, very difficult.
It does not sound like it. Oh my God.
But it actually really shifted my relationship to my dissertation for the better. Hindsight is 2020. So take this with a grain of salt. Like this, I'm like, again, trying to like tie a nice bow over a really difficult year. But like my ability to write my dissertation well and quickly was exponentially improved by the type of writing I had to do for my job at the NHA. So like for my job at the NHA, I do a lot of public facing writing. I'm constantly writing blog posts and profiles of public humanities projects, and talking to folks like you, and sort of like doing a lot of like sort of high level distillation work of like national conversations. So it's really public facing writing. And that's so different than the type of writing you have to do for a dissertation, right? Where you're like thinking really deeply about one tiny thing, and like thinking really specifically about one piece of primary source material. And I just flexing the like public facing writing muscle made my dissertation writing so much stronger, because it like reminded me that like writing doesn't have to be this like arduous, the ways in which type of writing where you're just like flowery for no reason. Like you can cut through a lot of the BS of academia when you're reminding yourself of who you're writing for.
I love that, because that's definitely a critique that, again, I've been in a PhD program for all of 5 weeks. So 5-6 years, 5 weeks, obviously, different ends of the spectrum, but that's something I have been hearing a lot from older students, and just in my experience of reading, scholarly work, it can be very just draining sometimes and kind of pedantic. And it's just like, why do I need a dictionary for every sentence? Like, I thought I wouldn't need these words after the GRE. Like, I feel lied to. So like I do not feel prepared. So
little did you know that you would be like,
I literally had an assignment, and like, I was just highlighting every other word, and I was just like, insidious, fungibility. And I'm just like speaking it over and over again. I'm just like, what does this mean? So it's nice to know.
I love the word fungible. I don't even know what fungible means.
I thought it had to do with fungi. I wish I was kidding. It does. It has nothing to do with mushrooms or fungi or anything like that. Apparently it has to do with being expendable, like
Ah,
looking at the fungibility of like Black bodies and slavery. And I was like, context, it probably doesn't have
yeah.
to do anything with mushrooms, but considering I understood nothing else.
Okay, writing that.
Yeah, so we got some GRE words. Okay, but if you want to maybe like circle back to the question about just like personal experiences, I think
Yeah,
that would be cool. But again, I
yeah,
think you've already touched on it, so it's up to you.
yeah. So I was just recently talking with my students about elevator pitches and how to like authentically represent yourself in a short amount of time to someone you might want to like get a job from one day, or like you want to like have a networky conversation with them. And I, when I do my elevator pitch, and when I interviewed for my job at the NHA, I started by talking about the dinner table conversations growing up that informed where I'm at now. So I often start with like, I'm an arts and culture kid. Like my dad is a musician and like staunch labor union organizer, and my mom is a social worker who worked at a family planning nonprofit. And I am like, I was at dinner table conversations, I was steeped in thinking about the intersection of like arts and culture and like advocacy and support for communities of color and like disadvantaged women. And so when I think about like the value structures that I hold, it's exactly that. Like I'm sitting in meetings and conversations about the public humanities, and I think about the public humanities as a method that allows you to think about communities in new ways, not even new ways, in ways that like feel non-extractive, mutually beneficial, in ways that like encourage collaboration and support and like authentic community building. And so like those are the conversations that have informed how I have moved through my professional life, because that was the model that was given to me at the dinner table. So
Yeah. I love that. And this is so perfectly timed because on the 18th, I'm going back to, well, virtually going back to my college, Lehman College, shout out CUNY, shout out Kingsbury, shout out Bronx. And I'm going to be talking about elevator pitches. So this is perfect, like how to brand yourself, how to market yourself in a way that doesn't feel inauthentic. And I feel like it really comes back to this theme of storytelling, which is, I think, the common thread with public humanities. And I think with the work that you're interested in doing, that you are doing, and with the work that, I want to do in the future, it's all about listening to people's stories, but then also looking at your own past experiences and really asking yourself, how did you get here? And what tools do you already have within yourself, as, cheesy as that sounds, to I guess, do the sort of work that you want to do, or to start asking questions to prepare you to do the work that you want to do. So I think that's perfect. Those dinner time conversations.
yeah.
So yeah, I think I guess the last question that I really have, although for selfish reasons, I'm like, I want to keep talking. This is amazing. But I guess the last official question I have is, how can people get involved in public engagement and humanities work, whether they're in undergrad or in grad program, they're not students, just how can people in general get involved with this sort of work?
Yeah. So I would say, so a couple of things that I said previously, like volunteering is a way of establishing yourself in communities in like long-term ways that feel authentic to your interests and passions and values. But if you're also in a space where you're doing research, like producing a dissertation or a master's thesis, thinking about that document as a creative text, like it does not have to just be something that meets the checkpoints of your your degree. It can be something that has another life, that has legs outside of that space, and that can do work for you. Where you're not like doing public humanities work and reinventing the wheel at the same time, right? Like pull from the things that you're thinking about constantly and think about who else would be interested in having that conversation or thinking about those things at the same time. And yeah, I'll leave it there. I feel like those are two really good starting points. Think about what you're already doing and who else would be interested, and then pull from your skill sets and interests and values, and find other folks who are interested in doing that work as well with you. Because public humanities work should not be a solo activity. It should always be something done in community, with publics. Something that I think I said during your NYU class, and that I'll say again here, is that like public humanities as a term is a tricky term, because it implies that like the university is not full of community members, or is not itself part of a public, and public humanities, if not engaged with critically, can like really reinforce some like top-down structures of thinking around like class and race, implying that like the academic is the authority and the public is like something separate. So like always remembering that like the knowledge structures that you're pulling from aren't the authoritative, like you're not always right, and often you might be wrong. And being steeped in community reminds you of that. So reminding yourself to not go it alone will only make your work better.
I feel like I keep saying I love that at the end of everything that you say, but that's because I'm like sitting here, I'm like taking notes, I'm like nodding, I'm like, yes, this is what we like to hear. Okay. I mean, I don't think I could have wrapped it up better if I tried. Not that I had anything planned for a wrap up, so this is perfect. But I literally cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your exceptionally busy schedule to talk to me and to talk to anyone who is going to be watching this video or videos plural on TikTok. So I cannot thank you enough, and this was an absolutely amazing conversation.
Anytime, Victoria. I also want to make myself available to any folks who might be watching. So informational interviews are sort of the magic. Like, I think that they're magic in terms of like understanding how industries work, how jobs actually work. And so I'm always happy to talk to folks. I can say what my email is.
Yes, that'd be wonderful.
Over. It's M.May-Curry. So M and then my last name, MAYCURRY, at the NHAlliance.org.
Awesome.
So feel free to reach out to me.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much.
Yep, no problem. Talk to you soon.